This is Euronews Now. I'm Helena Humphrey. Here are your top stories. President Zelensky warns of increased Russian attacks this week as Ukraine marks 6 months since Russia's full-scale invasion of the country and 31 years since it declared independence from the former Soviet Union. Russian authorities are investigating the car bomb that killed the daughter of a prominent ultra-nationalist political analyst. Kyiv's denied any involvement in the murder. And Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić warns that Belgrade will intervene directly if NATO peacekeepers don't protect Serbs living in Kosovo.
Ukraine is preparing to celebrate its independence from the USSR in 1991 on Wednesday. This year, the date also marks exactly 6 months since Moscow invaded the country. Kyiv fears Russia could step up airstrikes this week. President Zelensky has warned that Russia may be preparing to put Ukrainian fighters captured in Mariupol on public trial to coincide with the anniversary. If this despicable trial takes place, if our people are brought into these settings in violation of all agreements, all international rules, there will be a reaction. This will be the line beyond which no negotiations are possible. Russia will cut itself off from the negotiations. There will be no more conversations. Our state has said everything. Western leaders on Sunday called for restraint around Ukraine's Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, Europe's largest, which has been occupied by the Russian army. Fighting around the plant has raised fears of a nuclear disaster worse than Chernobyl. German Chancellor Olaf Scholz has said sanctions against Russia will continue until peace in Ukraine is restored.
The Russian government has to understand that they will not get rid of the sanctions simply by waiting until circumstances change again. That is only possible in the context of a fair agreement with Ukraine, and so a peaceful situation will come about when the Russian state is prepared to accept this.
Activists stormed the Open Doors event at the German Chancellery in Berlin, demanding an embargo on Russian gas. 2 activists with writing on their body, caught on camera next to Scholz, were apprehended by security. Authorities in Moscow have launched an investigation after the daughter of Russian ultra-nationalist ideologue Alexander Dugin was killed in a suspected car bomb attack outside the capital on Saturday. Investigators say an explosive device was planted in the SUV driven by Daria Dugina. No one has claimed responsibility for the attack, but a Russian political analyst and former speechwriter for President Putin suggests it's linked to the war in Ukraine.
For the propaganda apparatus, this is an act of intimidation. In general, for loyalists, for a loyal voter, this is a symbolic act demonstrating that hostilities are confidently transferred to the territory of Russia, which means that this is no longer an abstract war that you watch on TV. This is already happening in Russia. Not only Crimea is being bombed, but terrorist attacks are already being carried out in Moscow region.
Kyiv has strongly denied any involvement. Alexander Dugin is a fierce champion of Russia's authoritarian leadership and is a vocal supporter of Moscow's war in Ukraine. His daughter was also a strong critic of the West and was sanctioned by the United States in March for writing that Ukraine would perish if it joined NATO.
I need ammunition, not a ride. These are the memorable words uttered by Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky 6 months ago, just a few days after the Russian invasion of Ukraine began.
Nice to meet you, Ursula. You're welcome.
With a lack of weapons and soldiers, the Ukrainian president needed stronger allies to face Moscow's aggression. One way he did this was through his media strategy, using social networks to show the world of war happening on Ukrainian doorsteps.
The change in defense policies in countries as important as Germany, Spain, the United States, or even the level of international organizations, such as the European Union, where, I insist, is the first time the bloc has sent military weapons to a war zone. I think that speaks to the effectiveness of Zelensky's communication strategy.
Creo que hablan de la eficacia, ¿no? de la estrategia de comunicación de Zelensky.
Zelensky has made appearances virtually at various media events, from the NATO summit to important galas such as the Cannes Film Festival or the Grammy Awards. This allows him to maintain the narrative tension and keep the war in global conscience. At the end of July, Zelensky appeared with his wife in a report for Vogue magazine, which raised a lot of criticism online for its poor taste while the war rumbled on. But experts consider it in line with his strategy.
Those photos are controversial and raise the issue again. It has put it back into the public arena and reminded the public that Ukraine is being invaded by Putin. I would say it's part of a good communication strategy. Not subject, of course, to criticism, but with a clear objective, which is that we should not forget that 6 hours from Madrid, for example, there's a war going on.
His approach to politics is framed as one that appeals to the emotions, sentiment over reason. Specific video sharing is a key close to Zelensky's chest. For instance, the conquest of the Snake Island was framed as a symbol of defiance to Moscow by Kyiv.
It is an example of how footage and audio is being used to show epic situations, very dramatic situations, and draw attention to the war. Not to mention all the hundreds and hundreds of videos in which Ukrainian citizens show us the massacres of war.
As the war continues 6 months on, today communications is no less a weapon than guns and tanks. For experts, it is the first time in a conflict that platforms have been used to galvanize empathy and support to this magnitude.
Serbian President Aleksandar Vučić has warned NATO that it must protect the Serbian minority in Kosovo or Belgrade will move to do it itself. NATO peacekeepers stepped up their presence in Kosovo last week after the collapse of EU-mediated talks. Vučić says it aimed at pushing Serbs out of Kosovo, something he says he won't allow.
There will be no refugee columns, and we will save our people from persecution and pogroms. If NATO doesn't want to do it, if KFOR forces don't want to do it.
This comes as EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell hosted mediated talks between the leaders of Serbia and Kosovo last week. Tensions have been rising between the Balkan neighbours since Pristina declared last month that Serbian identity documents and vehicle licence plates would no longer be valid in Kosovo. Vučić also claims Albanian gangs are spilling into northern Kosovo, where most Kosovo Serbs live and need to be stopped. Serbia, along with its allies Russia and China, has refused to recognise Kosovo's 2008 Declaration of Independence. Britain's biggest container port, Felixstowe, has been brought to a standstill. Some 2,000 workers began an 8-day strike on Sunday, joining a series of industrial walkouts around the country, which are hitting supply chains hard. While staff deny the strikes are coordinated, they say the 8% pay rise offered by the port is not enough for a company making millions in profit.
It's nothing to do with a national strategy or anything like that. It's something which has happened here at a local level, and it reflects what's happening elsewhere, because people all over the country, I think, are feeling the same way. That's why it appears to be, perhaps it appears to be coordinated, because people everywhere are feeling the same way and coming to the same conclusion. Enough is enough. We are not going to take this anymore.
Located some 150 kilometres northeast of London, the port handles around 4 million containers a year. While this is almost half of the country's incoming shipping freight, bosses at the port say they believe what they are offering workers is fair.
We agree they deserve a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, and I think that's what we give them.
Britons are facing the worst cost of living crisis in decades as wages fail to keep pace with inflation and grocery costs and utility bill increases. According to the Office of National Statistics, the inflation rate is at a 40-year high,